Travis, you're here to talk about the esports.
It's an up-and-coming thing.
It's great that you're here because we wanted to talk about ESPN and esports and everything. And I reached out to ESPN and we're going to get them on. I think maybe later in the week I'm going to talk to some of those folks. I reached out to Rod, of course, who used to work here at GameSpot as well. So we're going to get those guys in later in the week. But you were just so happened to be in town today. So
yeah, no, this was great. I woke up and had a DM from you asking if I could Skype in, and I said, well, why would I do that when I'm right around the corner? I could just come in and sit down. So
perfect.
Yeah.
So you're just fresh back from North American LCS, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So down in LA, for those that don't know, I do work at GameSpot, but sometimes little hidden away because I just do the esports stuff, and I'm down in Los Angeles too. So nothing that I'm never around the office here to show up in any of the backgrounds.
Yeah, once in a blue moon.
So, but yeah, NALCS just kicked off this weekend, and that's really exciting.
And another big exciting thing that's happening, at least when it comes to folks like us who are we're not within the sort of esports community, but we're very much like interested in what's going on, is what's happening with ESPN. It's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, Bobby Kotick was saying that when they bought MLG, they said this is part of our future plans to be the ESPN of esports. And it turns out ESPN wanted to also be the ESPN of esports. They've set up this new section on their site. They'd been dabbling in esports before. They of course had the international on a while ago as well. Like, from you, right, from somebody who's been covering esports, covering League of Legends for so long, what does this say to you that ESPN are getting involved?
I mean, it's really interesting. I think for a long time, especially within the esports community, there was a lot of desire for validation because I think the general sentiment among the esports community and fans and people working in it is that esports are on par with traditional sports, the physical athletic sports. And, anytime that ends up happening or anytime that conversation starts up, sports fans and even prominent figures at ESPN and other places have said, oh, this is a joke, like they just talk about it as a nerd thing and whatever. So I do think that there's a great deal of validation for seeing them come in. And I imagine it's only a sign of things to come as we start to see kind of this interesting Venn diagram blur of game sites like GameSpot that cover esports, and then obviously sports sites like ESPN covering esports as well.
Yeah, so I guess this wind change has been happening for years, but even in terms of months, like I remember there was a story in Kotaku a couple of months ago when ESPN aired, I think it was like a Hearthstone tournament or something on ESPN2. It was
Heroes of the Dorm, the Heroes of the Storm, like collegiate tournament. Yeah.
And one of them, there was some really great tweets about it. I can't believe ESPN2 are showing nerds playing video games. Says a self-confessed nerd who plays fantasy football. My favorite one is, can we all just take a moment to appreciate that the World of Warcraft Championship is on ESPN2 right now? Do you think like this is like a big statement then? Is this more representative of people becoming okay with esports more, or is this them looking for an in on something that's quite profitable?
I mean, it's a little bit of both, right? Like I don't think a company is going to be interested in covering something that no one's really interested in, but I do think that it also sort of shows that people that are making those kind of tweets, quite frankly, their opinion is relevant whenever it comes to this discussion, because what is actually happening is you're seeing more and more. I mean, BBC broadcast League of Legends World Championships a couple months ago. ESPN is getting in, like the sports sites, sports companies. More and more sponsors are coming in. All of those people are validating esports as a sport, and so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, like if a sports fan who is only interested in watching MLB isn't interested in esports or doesn't feel like it's a sport, because everybody else is deciding that it is. All the people that are actually covering this stuff, all the people that are making business deals around it, do think that. So I think,
and all the people who watch it.
Right, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing, is that the viewership is there and it's only growing. Fans are more passionate. Fans are getting more interested in the stuff. More and more stuff. Esports are coming along. CSGO getting bigger and bigger every year. League continues to be a juggernaut. Like it's just, this is, in my opinion, the future, and we're only going to see this stuff. It's going to be very funny to look back on any of this footage or any of these comments like 20, 30, 40 years down the road, whenever there's it's just commonly accepted. Yeah.
Okay. Let me if you allow me to digress and being self-indulgent for a little second, let me transport maybe this a couple of years ahead, further into the future. And I kind of want to talk to Peter about this a little bit. If what we're seeing is the mass media getting into something like esports, which for a long time was this sort of bubble, right? We kind of feel the same way about video games, right? When we were growing up, it was specialist magazines, specialist press. There were some mainstream television dabbling into it, but for the most part, it was sort of off temperature and it never really clicked, right? We don't have a long series of television shows that sort of lasted the test of time when it comes to games. Looking ahead, say like something like 5 years time, if something like esports, which is this super sort of like small, passionate, well not small, sorry, but like this like very passionate community, focused community, I'll say, is something that ESPN are trying to get into. Do you think maybe this is the start of the mainstream press, you know, in the way we've seen mainstream culture really latch onto games in the past 2 years, try and sort of finally grab the gaming audience? Like, do you see this happening outside of esports?
I think it'll be easier for excuse me, for esports content to be like easily consumable and like to discover it. But the one thing that I really wonder about is whether ESPN is the right brand for people who are already interested in esports, because they are aligned with things like football and baseball. And so while I don't think that ESPN will fail at what they're attempting, I think what they're going to do is provide a foundation that other people will then use as an example to bolster up maybe a more community focused like esport thing. And I'm really from the outside looking in, but you know, for me, like so many people who consume esports content, I hate that I just said consume content. The people who get that stuff, you know,
don't worry, we'll edit it out later. Right?
Yeah, they do it on Twitch, they do it on YouTube, right? Like they're engaging with this stuff the way that they have been, and I don't know if they're going to then flock to ESPN. But again, like you were saying, I think it's a good example of sort of the economy of esports being validated by these bigger players that I think will then provide a solid foundation. It's still hard to tell, like, you know, when the balance is going to tip in terms of mainstream people wanting this, because I think there are even a lot of people like our age, and I don't know who is the outlier and, you know, who's the exception to this, but not all of us like esports, right? But the younger generation, they really do. So I think this might actually provide a stronger, like long-term gain for things rather than the short term. So I could see it making it more mainstream and more popular, but I think ESPN is going to have maybe a rough time.
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because like if there is this big sort of clanism around esports, and they're well needed to be, because like I remember being super into Counter-Strike and sort of being vaguely interested in watching competitive games, and when it tried to break through, and it kind of did, and then it like petered out again. Like the community in these like esports games, from my outside perspective, they seem to understand that if they want this stuff to really work, they need to be passionate, they need to give a shit. So when you see something like ESPN getting involved, obviously, like you're saying, it's a really good sort of marker. It's a great way of saying, okay, we've been legitimized in this way. But do you think the esports community cares about ESPN's coverage like outright? Do they care enough that to watch it? Because presumably, if they're happy that it exists, if it crashes and burns, that's obviously not a very good, you know, commentary on esports either.
Yeah, I think that the solution to that is to hire people who people care about and who already have a following, and that seems to be what they're doing. I mean, and full disclosure, these guys are my friends, but you know, people like Fion, who is a very prolific writer within the League of Legends community and covers, you know, all the esports side of that stuff. It got picked up by them, and he's going to be putting features up and already has several times. And they've reached out to even like the moment that this was actually kind of an interesting story. The moment ESPN went live with the site and the announcement went out, they only had, I think it was League, Dota, and Hearthstone up on the top tab.
Yes, I remember.
And people were, you know, the CS:GO community kind of went crazy about it. The Smash community, like a lot, because all the ESPN announcement went up on the boards for all these different communities, and everybody's reaction was like, yeah, but they're not covering our game, or they're only going to cover League. And they did a really good job of immediately being like, actually, here's a really cool write-up on the Smash tournament that's happening this weekend. And they posted that last week. And apparently they have CS:GO content going up today. So I think they're doing a good job of being really proactive and finding people that are already creating content within these communities and really helping to spotlight them. I think the other thing, and not to spin out off into too much of a larger discussion, but
go for it.
I think that what's interesting to wonder is what are ESPN's long-term plans in the esports industry, because is it just like, oh, we're just going to do these write-ups, or are they looking to do more stuff like they did with the Heroes of the Dorm tournament, where they're going to broadcast it on ESPN2? Are they looking to, you know, we're seeing a lot of these companies move into streaming traditional sports on their sites and doing stuff like that, Are they going to become a Twitch competitor whenever it comes to
Right.
a lot of these tournaments? So, and if that's the case, and they're, ESPN starts broadcasting a League of Legends tournament or a Hearthstone tournament or whatever, and then they're also having coverage on their site with really prolific folks from that community. I keep using prolific; it's my new favorite word. Then we're going to start to see, I think, that brand become much more accepted and well known within the industry.
Yeah, I guess last question, it's sort of like a personal one that I want to ask you. I touched on it a bit earlier. Like, you were at NALCS last week. You've been covering this stuff for years and years and years. We were talking before the show. You were saying about how it used to be like you turn up to these events and like maybe one other YouTuber, and now you turn up in SportsCenter and ESPN and everyone's there. Do you think this has been a long time coming, or like, are you shocked in 2016 that ESPN have done this, or does it now feel like right?
Yeah, I think now's a good time. I think that the growth has been very significant over the past years for this, but it's definitely would have been a very strange thing for me to see at the start of LCS, 3 or so years ago. Now with all the changes I've been seeing, Rick Fox, former NBA Lakers champion, owns a team and NALCS.
I saw
now.
the ring. Is that where you had the ring on?
There was a ring. I don't want to say where I got it, but yes, I was the first and probably only time I'll have something worth $400,000 on my finger.
$400,000.
That was what I was told. And so like that stuff is just happening, and especially in 2015, we saw more and more of this. So it feels like this is just the next step.
Yeah. Travis Gafford, thank you so much for coming in. Great to have you in the lobby, finally.
Yeah, thank you. It's been good to be here and do some content with you. Now I'm going to just get up and exit this room.
We're not doing any trailers, so you just take your cans off and walk out, and hopefully there's a short guy with less hair than you standing out who's going to come in and talk about different video games.
Okay, I'll look for him.
There he is. He's coming right in.
Thanks
so
again,
much.
guys. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
See ya.